Hello everyone, Ashley here with a very important announcement. Beginning on August 29th, 2023, the Stitcher app and website will end its operations. What does that mean for you? Well, unfortunately, it means that you will no longer be able to access your shows, your downloads, preferences, or listening history. It's gone. Kaput. Finito. That means you can't even listen to us, and we can't even put anything on the Stitcher app. However, you will be able to continue listening to Ham Radio, Stranger Things podcast, as well as your other favorite podcasts on every major listening platform such as Google, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, uh, all the majors, Spotify. Yeah, I can't believe I forgot about that. Spotify. Basically any app on the internet you will be able to access to listen to ham radio or your other favorite podcasts, but you can't do it on Stitcher after August 29th. So again, August 29th, the Stitcher app is going away, and so will its website. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry I had to bring you that very depressing news. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Jasmin.
And you're tuned into Ham Radio Stranger Things Podcast.
It's a ham radio.
The Cadillac of ham radios.
And welcome everyone back to yet another episode of the Ham Radio Podcast. Today, Jasmin and I, along with a very special guest who we will introduce to you guys in just a bit, will be presenting our favorite Stranger Things scenes and or moments from beginning from season 1 all the way up to the recent season 4. And we'll even be sharing some of our least favorite scenes because let's be real, not every TV series is perfect, and that includes Stranger Things. But first, we have a little housekeeping to take care of, and I'm going to turn it over to Jasmin to let you guys know where you can find us on the socials and where you can listen to the podcast. Jasmin?
Yeah, so absolutely. So as always, you can find us on Instagram at ham.radio.media, on Twitter at hamthrough, on YouTube at hamradiomedia or hamradio1983, that's our handle. We also have a Discord, the link will be in the episode description. You can also email us at hamradiomedia@gmail.com. Ashley has a fanfic on AO3, which will also be linked in the episode description. And the podcast is available on all major podcasting platforms, Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, etc. Please consider leaving us a review and a rating. We will have totally tubular stuff coming up, so please follow us on our socials to keep up with the podcast, all of our new content.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Jasmin. So, our guest today is no stranger to the show. She's been on a few times. I'm, of course, referring to Robin Farrell. She is the host of the Coffee Contemplation Podcast, a fellow Stranger Things podcast, and I'd like to welcome her back to the show. As many of you may know, Robin joined me, Ashley, last year to discuss a few episodes from season 4. After they came out, we kind of broke them down and analyzed them, but not, in a typical rewatch way. We just discussed some of our favorite points about them. And so Jasmin and I were so honored to have her back today to talk more Stranger Things. So first, Robin, what's been going on over at the Coffee podcast since you were on last year? Do you have any new episodes coming up or anything new you'd like to share with everyone?
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on today because I have been looking forward to this all week. So, yeah, we over on Coffee and Contemplation, we actually have been taking a bit of a hiatus. We had to, our whole approach over there is very like, taking long looks at things. We had the first 3 seasons to kind of sit back and let them percolate before we even launched the podcast. So we've been trying to do that with season 4, but actually, yes, we are going to be coming out with season 4 recap episodes very soon. My goal is to have them to start airing them around the time that would be the anniversary of the release of season 4. So I don't actually know if we're going to be able to meet that, but that's the goal. So they are in the works, and and I'm really looking forward to it. It is time. The time has come.
Awesome. Can't wait for that. And before Jasmin asks you our next question, I would just like to let everyone know that Robin is an active member of our Discord server. So if you join us, you can talk to Robin about Stranger Things, anything you want to. She's really good to chat up things about on there. So she's on there. You can ask her anything about Coffee Contemplation or anything else you want to. I'm sure she'd love to interact with you guys about that.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So Robin, you recently began a new podcast called Classified, a D&D podcast earlier this year. Would you like to share more about that and what encouraged you to get started on it?
Yeah, Classified, it is a D&D podcast, but it's actually not, it's not an actual play podcast, which a lot of D&D podcasts are. So it's our tagline for it is applying Dungeons and Dragons to every fandom, one character at a time. And basically on each episode, 2 co-hosts join me to discuss how we would build playable characters out from those of our favorite fandoms. So far, we have 3 episodes out as of this recording, and they cover characters from the series Arcane, Super Mario Brothers, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And essentially the show has a very heavy emphasis on the classes, the Dungeons and Dragons classes, hence the title, but these are full builds, so that has grown to include race, alignment, background, and we delve into ability scores and feats and magical items, all that good stuff. So I'm a big D&D nerd, and I'm an active D&D player, and it's one of the things that I love most about Stranger Things is the way that Stranger Things has approached Dungeons and Dragons. So I've had this idea in my head, and it's been percolating for a long time. My friends and I will, whenever we get together and watch movies and shows, we will make observations like, oh, that was such a ranger move, or oh, that was a failed stealth roll. So that kind of led into this, and right now I am developing some ideas on how to work in some actual play using some of these character builds that the other co-hosts and I have kind of been talking about. But so far, as of this point, it's just a bunch of super nerdy discussion, but it is a lot of fun. So if any of the listeners like and or play Dungeons and Dragons and, enjoy crossing fandom universe streams, then definitely check it out. It's a lot of fun.
Yes, I've listened to, I believe I have listened to the first episode already, and it's really good. And I know next to nothing about D&D. I mean, I didn't even know it existed until I started watching Stranger Things. That's like my first introduction to it. And though I've grasped some of the basic concepts just watching Stranger Things, I still don't know really anything about it. So if you're like me and you want to get some education on Dungeons and Dragons, I highly encourage everyone to check it out. So, oh yeah, certainly. So usually when we have a guest on, we like to ask them an icebreaker question such as, when did you begin watching Stranger Things, or something like that. But I thought that since Robin has already been on our show before, why not just ask her a random question that is independent of Stranger Things? So Robin, what is a TV series from the 1980s or the 1990s that you'd want a reboot of featuring the original cast? It can be an animated series, a sitcom, a teen drama, whatever it is.
So I have to be honest that I think I misunderstood the question, because I think initially, I think when you said OG cast, I assumed that you meant the cast of Stranger Things. So, but I have 2 answers. So in thinking about that, my immediate thought was, Are You Afraid of the Dark, which has been remade already. But the reason that I thought
I loved that show as a kid.
Me
Sorry,
too. Yeah, no, absolutely.
It scared me as a child, so I could only watch like some episodes because I had a problem with vivid nightmares, which I still sometimes have. But I didn't mean to cut you off because I love that show as a kid.
Yeah, no, I did too. Like, it was kind of like a little bit less scary than because it is a spooky show, and that also feels very like on brand for Stranger Things. But what I liked about it in terms of like having, thinking about it, like if we were casting the Stranger Things cast, it has the framing device of the Midnight Society, but it's basically an anthology. So thinking about like the huge cast, it's like you could probably get everybody in there, maybe more than once. The other thing I thought of was X-Men, because there's so many characters, and again, that's another one. They already are rebooting it. But I will say that totally separate from Stranger Things, actually the thing that's been on my mind a lot lately has been Boy Meets World, because I've been listening to Pod Meets
Oh.
World, which is a fabulous podcast. It's Daniel Fishel, Ryder Strong, and Will Friedle, the cast from Boy Meets World. They've been going back through the series, and like a couple of them have never actually watched the show through because of their kind of conflicted relationship with it. So I adored Boy Meets World. It was one of my favorite shows as a, kid and teen. And
Me too.
so yeah, so but they talked about in one of their Q&A episodes, they actually talked about something that they've kind of been working on, like unofficially, nothing's actually in the works, but something that they would like to do would be to actually do a reunion show, but do it, it's not the Boy Meets World characters, it's the cast, but doing something totally new. So I don't know what that show would look like, but in hearing you frame the question in that way, that's immediately what I think of. I again, Boy Meets World was so special to me, and I still have a lot of nostalgia for it, and I really like them. Like, it's been cool listening to the Pod Meets World podcast, because it's kind of cool to get to know them. Like, that's one of the things I like about podcasts in general. It's very conversational, it's very informal in a lot of ways. So it ends up feeling like you're getting a chance to kind of sit down and chat with them every week. So I really think that could be a lot of fun. Again, I don't have anything specific, like what kind of a show. It's not it doesn't really answer your question, Ashley. I'm sorry, but it's immediately what I thought of, like something with that cast. And I mean, honestly, it could be something like kind of, I think I would love to see them do, like, I don't know, something a little more serious. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a big question, but those were the
I
things
have,
that were kind of on my mind.
yeah, I have their podcast like on, it's like in my list of things I haven't saved in my library because I haven't gotten to it yet, but I heard they were doing that, and I also really loved the show. Growing up, I've been watching, I don't know if you were a Scrubs fan, but I love Scrubs. And they have a podcast. I think they were kind of one of the first people to do it. That's kind of what started during the pandemic. The
Mhm.
two lead actors on that, Fake Doctors Real Friends, have a podcast where they basically do that. They go through each episode, and again, a lot of them like they'd never seen or watched, or
Mhm.
and it became kind of hit. And then you started having other shows who were doing it, and yeah, I love that because it's again something that's very special to me. I watched it later in life, not as a kid, but yeah, it's really cool. And they have other actors on the show, and you get to learn things. And the idea of that whole Boy Meets World cast doing something more serious, I think could be like, or like maybe something more like a dramedy, I think could be really cool too.
Mhm. Well, and they I know that the like in I actually never watched Scrubs, so I don't have like any familiarity with it really, but but I did know that the podcast existed, and I think there's one for The Office. Like there's it's become a real popular thing, and so I've only listened to Pod Meets World, but I know that one of the things I super appreciate is that they actually have episodes twice a week now. More of the recent episodes they do twice. They release 2 episodes a week, and they'll bring on like writers and directors and producers, and I appreciate that because I love all that stuff, and it's been really cool to like hear not just what the cast experience was like, but also what the behind the scenes stuff was like from the perspective of like the writer's room and the producer's room and the director's chair. So that's really cool. I mean, maybe the other shows do it too, but
Yeah, they do that as well. I think it was
yeah, it's
kind of,
great. It's
yeah,
so
it's
great.
great. And they started this during the pandemic, kind of just something to keep themselves sane. And I think it kind of, that was it's become so successful. Basically other actors from other shows went and copied it, which I think is a great idea. Like that's what's that phrase? The greatest form of flattery is imitation.
Right.
But yeah, they do that as well. Where they'll have on, the showrunner, they have like the line producer on,
Mm-hmm.
or like, the people in charge of like financing or music selection or directing.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting to kind of hear their perspectives. They have on like a lot of special guests, like, if a particular famous actor was in, had an arc on there, they'll have them on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool to hear their perspective and kind of hear what happened. And yeah, it's super. I love the behind the scenes stuff too. And there's stuff you wouldn't realize or think about or see. Yeah, that was really cool. And something that
Yeah,
was
for
really
sure.
neat is they had Brendan Fraser on, because
Oh,
he had an
cool.
arc on there that was,
Yeah.
if you're a Brendan Fraser fan, he had an amazing storyline on there. And this was before The Whale. So this was kind of before he had that massive career resurgence. So
The
like they've had a few,
Renaissance.
the Renaissance, yeah.
Yeah.
They've had a few people on where like I've recently gotten back into it, because you kind of ebb and flow with listening to stuff, and
Mhm.
I've recently got back into it. I'm like, oh, they have this person on, because now that like things have reopened, there's all these actors. I'm like, oh, I just saw them in something that they had on during the pandemic, because these people had nothing else to do because we we're all
Right.
stuck at home. Where it's like, oh, that's so cool. Like it's cool when you hear somebody and you're like, oh, now you're getting all this stuff and you're so amazing and that's so awesome. And yeah, it's super great.
But I think at the end of the day, I mean, to kind of also bring it back to the initial question, I think one of the reasons though that nothing, like I think I would almost be more in like rather than another reboot, I almost think that like in the spirit of the same idea of like I'd love to see this cast reunite, but for something new. I mean, that's kind of what Stranger Things is in a way. Like I think I would be more interested in seeing more things like Stranger Things where it's maybe not a reboot, but it's clearly being influenced by other things, like things from the 80s and 90s. And so, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons that I think Stranger Things made the splash that it did initially, was because it wasn't actually and the more that I delve
Mm.
into it, the more it's kind of like, yeah, there are definitely things where it's like, okay, that's absolutely ripped from Die Hard. That's almost a line for line ripped from, Star Wars or whatever. But there are so many things that aren't, that are clearly influenced by it, but stand on their own. So I think that's that would be almost like kind of more that's kind of more where I am with stuff like this. Like I like certain remakes and sometimes that they're great, but I think I would be more interested in like something new, maybe with, I mean, because again, Stranger Things brings in cast, guest cast appearances from people who were big in the 80s. But like doing something original with those people that's in the
Yeah,
same
I
kind of
love that about
style,
the
but
show.
yeah. So it's
Like,
more things like Stranger Things, honestly. Like I know it's supposed to
yeah,
be a totally separate question from anything to do with the show, but that's kind of it's Stranger Things all
Yeah,
the way down. What can I say?
yeah. Well,
yeah, no,
Boy Meets World is certainly a really good pick. I haven't watched the show in years, but I used to love it growing up, and I've never heard of that podcast, so I'll definitely be checking that out because like y'all were saying, that is really cool. They get all the crew members and stuff on there as well, and I think it's really really good that they bring in that side of the camera, so to speak, because you don't really
Yeah.
always get to hear from those people that do like 90% of the work. Um,
Right.
but
Well, and
like
it's cool
oh
for me too, because like
yeah,
I know film. I have a
mm-hmm,
much like I mean I have my degree in film. I work in media production, but so much of what I do is either corporate video or filmmaking. I don't know
mm-hmm,
that much about television, and that's so TV is a very like there's a lot of crossover, but it's also wildly different. So it's cool for me to like have it be in this like adjacent world, but to not actually know that much about it, like I said, my background and expertise is all in film and filmmaking. And but so it's cool. It's just really cool. It's a
yeah,
really cool podcast. Highly recommend.
yeah,
yeah,
and like to your point, I think one of the reasons that Stranger Things made such a big splash is that it pays homage to things people love, but it
Hmm.
is an original show, and particularly at that time, and now I feel like we're kind of coming back in a loop again. So much of the content out there are remakes or
Hmm.
reboots of things like, and there's a song lyric I love about this, the Bowling for Soup song. It's about like how everything is now like cartoons and remakes of stuff that was better when we were younger, and
Hmm.
it's so true. And like, it's just I think for me, and I think for a lot of people, we've hit a point where we're so saturated with that. We're like, I love the original. I don't want to see this. Like, I want something original. Give me something original. And Stranger Things definitely falls to that category. You can pay homage without it being a remake. And then when you do
Hmm.
see something wholly original that's really good, you're like, oh, this is fantastic. Like, Free Guy was probably one of my favorite movies of the past few years. And
Hmm.
and it's like one of the first original things that had like, yeah, it obviously pulled from other stuff, but it's so refreshing to see a nice original property that you can pay with homage without being a remake. And I agree. I think it's why it made such a big splash, is that people are clearly very hungry for that. And clearly the people that are like in charge in Hollywood are like, no, people want remakes. And it's like, no, actually we don't. Like,
I mean,
we're so sick of it.
they do make money. I mean, so that's something that I'm trying
Yeah.
to do now that like kind of the world, theaters are open again. We're closer to something more like normal life again. I'm trying to make a point, and granted, I did just go see the Super Mario Brothers movie today. However, I'm trying to make a point to like, if I see something that looks original and new, I'm trying to go and see them in the theater to like put my dollar there. I mean, actually the truth is like the Dungeons and Dragons, like I will be honest, like I thoroughly enjoyed the Dungeons and Dragons film, and I look forward to seeing where that goes. And that's technically a remake, kind of, sort of. So it can be done. It can be done well, but I think the more originality, the better.
Totally. And real quick before we proceed, a remake that I would probably really be engaged in, at least if it had the original cast and an original idea. And I know that it's technically already been remade, but it was totally different concept and it failed. But it's a show I've been watching recently or lately. That being Party of Five, that came out in the 90s. And I was like really impressed by how many stars were on that show. Like Jennifer Love Hewitt, Neve Campbell, Matthew Fox, Lacey Chabert, and they had like a ton of really popular guest stars from back in the day. Which, if you don't know who some of those people are, like Matthew Fox was in Lost, and Neve Campbell was in the Scream movies, and it's so weird, like watching her character in Party of Five and knowing, she was filming that at the same time the Scream movies were coming out, because they're like two totally different things. But yeah, I'd like to see that show maybe in like a sitcom format, or something like, original as much as they could possibly make it, because I always go, I wonder what those characters would look like, 30 years in the future. That's probably one I probably be the most invested in, at least not for like an entire series, but maybe like, you know, like a reunion thing with, like Boy Meets World, they were talking about, something like that, I think would be really cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Jasmin, do you have any shows?
I'm trying to think.
I will quickly, just one last thing I will say. I will add that I know this is technically it's a movie, but I know that they tried to remake Tron. And I mean, I'm a big advocate for the original Tron film, and I liked Legacy, but I actually recently watched an episode of Corridor Crew on YouTube, and they were reviewing both of the films, and they were saying like supposedly there's a Tron 3 in the works, but they were saying on Corridor Crew that it would actually be kind of cool if they worked in some of the more retro style of the original, like if they kind of met in the middle between the two, because the Tron Legacy was so sleek. I will add, as far as TV is concerned, I would love to see them bring back Tron Uprising, which was the animated series that they did. I liked that so much better than Tron Legacy. It was great, and no one watched it, which is why they canceled it. But it's on Disney Plus, so that's just kind of a random shout out. Like, bring that back. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I've never seen any of those, but I know people who are fans of the original Tron.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of something. There's sitcoms. My friend and I got really into The Nanny during the pandemic, because that was on in the 90s, and it was one of those like major hit, but then after it wrapped, like it wasn't available for streaming until the pandemic. And so for the first time, like millions of people could watch it, and we got like, that show is insanely good. We got hooked on that. So we've always said that like somebody should not so much reboot it, but bring it back, or they have like the kids from the original, like it's their kids now. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That would be super cool. I'm trying to think of anything else. I feel like any of the real properties I'd want to see back, I think have already kind of been brought back. Like I was a big fan of the new Ghostbusters, like the Ghostbusters Afterlife movie. Apparently it's getting another sequel. So I was a really big fan of that. I feel like a lot of things I would probably put on the list either have been brought back and either it failed, or they brought it back and I was like, I really enjoyed that. So I think that's the only one that really comes to mind for me, because something that, when you talk about reboots and bringing things back, I just
will
read what.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just was gonna say that I also they, as of this recording, they just very, very recently dropped the trailer for the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles animated film, and I am so excited for that. That looks great because of the animation style. It looks very much like it very took some inspiration from Into the Spider-Verse. I love the animation style. They're acting like actual teenagers. April, it just looks great. So it's a reboot I'm super excited about.
But I do like that there's this trend now where there was kind of used to be about, in Ninja Turtles. The Ghostbusters kind of went through a similar thing where there was some random movie in the middle that that was freaking awful. And now they're gonna come back and been like, hey, here's something people actually want. So I do appreciate that trend. I will just say that my point I was gonna make was I have this friend that we watch, so we get together to watch movies and TV twice a week. We started during the pandemic because it was when they announced it was basically going to be the next few months, and I was kind of losing it. And she was like, hey, let's do this, to kind of break up the monotony. And we've hit a point where we've started watching older stuff, but then we've kind of hit a point where we were watching 90210, which was great, but then we got partway through the first season. It's like, wow, this is not held up very well at this point. And so we've hit a point where we're watching older things, but you hit a point, at least for me, where something that would have been really innovative and cool and interesting at the time is just really cringy now, or because everything feels like a very special episode, or just certain stuff hasn't aged well.
Yeah.
And that's really unfortunate when you're part with you watching something, you realize oh, this just has not, I can't keep watching this. It just hasn't aged well. So I think that is also an issue when you're talking about bringing things back, which is that, okay, this would have been really great in its time, but now it just doesn't hold up. Our values have changed. The way the words we use, the way we talk about things has changed so drastically. So I do kind of appreciate it. I know when people do want to try to do that stuff, it can be challenging to take a property where it's well, that was okay in the 80s or the 90s, but sure as hell isn't okay now.
Yeah.
All right, so circling back to Stranger Things here, Robin, what are your thoughts on the Stranger Things stage play that's been announced, and the recent announcement that the show The Burrows is going to be coming out as well?
I am a lot more interested in the Burrows than I am the play. The play is hey, if for anybody who is super excited about it, cool, you can have my extra viewings. But I'm not super interested in it. I would have been a lot more interested in it if it was just a character piece, if it was just a character study on this is just going to be a slice of life. This is these characters at this time in their lives, and it's purely character driven. The fact that there's going to be some element of Henry Creel comes to town, that was kind of the automatic turn off for me, because for me, prequels are just hardest narratives to do well. So I think the challenge is already baked into that, because you're either locked into a framework so you can't really do too much, or you end up disregarding it. So it's a very difficult thing to pull off well. That said, yeah, I think I don't remember. I actually looked up the letter that Matt and Ross Duffer, released when they were announcing the fact that season 4 was their last season, or season 4 was coming out on the date that they announced it, and also going to be the last. So it wasn't in there, but I don't remember where I saw it, but I remember seeing at some point that their spin-off content was not going to be related. It was going to be potentially within the same universe, but it wasn't going to be the same characters. So the play felt and I know they're not, as far as I know, not directly involved with the play, but that felt very counter. So I can't say where that was stated. I mean, I swear I saw it somewhere, but I can't find it. So maybe I just misinterpreted it.
I think I know what you're talking about. In that letter, I feel like it's more implied, because I think there's a line in there about we've got other things coming, other, ways we're going to expand or explore this universe. But first, we hope you'll join us as we finish the story about, this amazing, cover of a girl and a police chief and a determined mother. I think that's the line you're talking about, where they basically said, yeah, we've got other things we want to explore, but first we hope you'll join us as we close off this chapter. And I think they did address that in the interview. I don't think you're wrong. I think you're
Yeah,
right.
I want to say it was like in an interview where they said it's not going to be the
Yeah.
same characters, because that was really exciting to me, because that was actually something you guys talked a little bit about in the live stream event that you guys had a few weeks ago, which was the idea of the fact that they're aware of knowing when to kind of wrap things up, that they're not going to just keep dragging it out, and that they have said they're drawing a line in the sand. They're saying we're going to end it here. That kind of felt like in line with the idea of we're not going to just milk these characters out until, I mean, like, I'm fine if they want to do, like, the books and whatnot. I enjoy the companion novels. Those are great. But
Me too.
like the fact that the play is going to be delving into, like, if the play had been focused on it's going to be upside down stuff, but it's taking place in Canada, it's on the other side of the country, it's in somewhere else in the world, like, that would have been interesting. But yeah, and like I said, if the play was going to focus on, like, just them, like, in just a character driven drama, cool, like, that would be interesting. But the fact that they're kind of going to merge in Henry Creel feels it just doesn't personally interest me. But I am super interested in the Burrows, because the Burrows sounds like it's exactly what we were just talking about, the idea that it's going to focus on totally new characters, totally new setting, but it's very much in the same style. It's an unlikely group of people. The fact that it sounds like it's set in a it sounds like it's going to be a slightly older cast, and maybe with some sprinkling of younger people, that's really interesting to me. So yeah, I'm very interested in the Burrows. I can't wait to hear more about that. But yeah, I'm not super interested in the play, but I certainly don't bear it any ill will. I'm kind of like, cool, I hope it's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that one, and I've seen this to Ashley. I don't know if we actually said this on the podcast on the live stream. I know we talked about this. But when I was reading kind of more about the play, so one of the people involved with it, Jack Thorne, one of the playwrights, is one of the same people that was involved in Harry Potter and the Cursed Child.
Yeah.
So when I read that, I'm like, oh, it's this thing. It's this thing where people who know nothing about these characters, like, I'm sorry, I've heard this guy is supposedly a great playwright, but I don't see it, because I've seen Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, and to be clear, it's not something I ever wanted to see. I had no interest in it. My dad happened to know somebody who was on some list for theater tickets, and he saw Harry Potter. He was like, I got his tickets to this. He was so excited. And so, like, of course, somebody buys you expensive theater tickets, of course you're gonna go with them, right? And so we did this whole thing. We went down to Toronto and see it. And I will say the special effects are absolutely incredible. The actors did a great job. But we both walked out of it, and my dad's comment, who again, he'd read me the books as a kid, was like, yeah, that didn't feel authentic. He's like, that doesn't feel like the Harry Potter we know. And I was like, yeah, and Teddy wasn't in it. And he was like, who's Teddy? Because I don't think he didn't read the later books. When I could read them myself. And I explained who Teddy was. And he's like, yeah, that's weird. So yeah, like, it felt, again, if they'd taken that concept and done it with, I don't know, characters at Beauxbatons or Durmstrang, you know what I mean? That would have been cool. But because they used the same characters, it didn't feel authentic. I tried to read the script. I couldn't even get through more than a few pages of that. So when I heard that, I'm like, oh, it's this weird, like, the writer said it's gonna be canon, but it's not. Like, it's gonna be this weird after thing. Everyone's like, it's gonna be this weird afterthought that years later we're all gonna be like, remember that ridiculous thing that they did? Wow, that was like, it'll make them a bunch of money, but we're all gonna be, it's be one of those things we're all gonna be like, oh yeah, that non-canon weird ass play they did.
I mean, it's possible that it might wind up being a thing where they're only, mentioning that Henry Creel is involved is, he might be like a cameo, and that they're using that as leverage for the marketing, and that's because that's what seemingly, that's the kind of thing that theoretically the fandom is interested in, and that, ultimately it is going to be mostly like, because ultimately the setting is very interesting to me. I'm very compelled by this idea of, like, yeah, who was Hopper? Who was Joyce? What was, how did Bob interact with them? but I'm interested in those dynamics. But that, I mean, I'm a very character-driven audience member. I'm the kind of person who likes that. Those are the things about Stranger Things, in fact, that I am the most compelled, which is one of the reasons I like season 2 as much as I do. It's more of those interpersonal relationships that I find so compelling, less so than a lot of the intricate plot stuff, which is one of the reasons I don't participate as much in a lot of the like theory conversation, because I'm more interested in like, okay, but I want to see how Steve and Dustin are going to interact in season 5. I'm interested in knowing like, how is that, I was looking forward to what is Max and Steve's relationship, like can he be a surrogate older brother as along with Dustin, so I think for me, like the idea of, oh, it's going to be set at this time with these characters, but it may not be about their, it's going to not necessarily be a character driven piece. It's going to be more of an event or investigative type of narrative. I mean, again, I don't have anything against that. It's just, I would have been more interested in character driven, but it's also in the UK, which I think Ashley, you had mentioned at one point, like we're not going to have access to it for a while.
No,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And that's why I totally agree with you, Robin, about everything you just said. Like, I'm more excited about the Burrows because I know that I will have access to that. I mean, certainly
Mm-hmm.
if they record the play and put it on Netflix, I mean, I would watch it just because, it's Stranger Things content. Like you said, like I think maybe the putting the stuff about Henry Creel in there, it's probably more of a marketing thing to get butts in seats.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not that, and if it really is canon to tell the more of the prequel story to what's happened in the series, I would be very disappointed with that, because to me it's, you go, okay, well, isn't that why you expanded season 4, was to have opportunities to do that? And to me that would feel like there's something that you do in season 5 because it's the final season, not on a stage play that's only going to be shown in London, which most people who watch Stranger Things will not be able to, go and watch. And
Yeah.
as Robin, you probably know this, but Jasmin certainly knows this. I am a little bit more invested in the investigative part of the show and the lore and stuff. I used to not be that way, but until season 4 came out, and all the stuff we learned in there, and now I'm like, well, I have something to go on here. I just want to hurry up and figure all this out and get all these answers from the show, and see how it ends and how it all connects and what's going on here. But I would say from the play, I would really be interested in if it was just us seeing, Joyce and Hopper, what they were up to in high school and all that good stuff. Maybe, throw in Hopper's dad, because he's always bringing up his dad, but they never really go further into what
Mm-hmm.
kind of father his dad was. Was he an alcoholic? Was he just a mean guy? And like, what is it that caused their relationship to be seemingly fractured? I mean, where is his dad? Is his dad passed on? I mean, is he still living in Hawkins? Things like that they've never gotten around to on the show, and for a lot of good reasons. But I think, for what I'll say real quick is just, I think if the play really is canon and they really are tying in the Henry Creel stuff into it and using that as the outlet to do it, I think would be a mistake, in my opinion. But
I
props
agree.
to
Agree with
everyone
that.
who's going to be able to go. I think that's really cool, and there's going to be leaked pictures on Twitter, so I'll
Oh
be
yeah.
looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's where I kind of stand with things. Also, I'll say real quick. I mean, I know they're obviously very excited about this play and the fact that it comes out, later this year. But for me, and this is kind of gonna segue us into, our next question here. But for me, I'm like, yeah, that's great about the play, but can we like get something about season 5? Because that's what I'm gonna be watching. That I know I'm gonna be watching, Um, how about we, focus on that versus this play? That's kind of, how I feel about things. I don't know how you guys think about it that way, but that's me.
Well, the other thing I want to add is that the Burrows, the Burrows is going to be from creators that worked on something. Like, I mean, Jasmin, you brought up the Jack Thorne is attached to the play, and that he, and his connection to Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, which I also did not like. I did finish the entire play reading it when it came out, and yikes. But the two that are attached to the Burrows, I have their names here. Jeffrey Addison, Will Matthews, they worked on they were attached to the Dark Crystal series, which was not perfect, but I liked that certainly a lot more. And I could see that there was a lot of effort in that, and that they were paying a lot of homage to the Dark Crystal film. So, and that extends to like a lot of the fact that like they were working with the Henson Company, and that they clearly knew what they were doing. I didn't like all the choices that they made, but clearly they had a very thorough appreciation for the source material. And so I find that just between those two things, I'm a lot more encouraged just at this stage, just knowing who's involved. And that's a lot more encouraging. So, yeah, I mean, and at the same time, like I remember hearing, like I said, I'm also not a super big fan of the idea of like bringing it back to what it sounds like might be another love triangle between Joyce Hopper and Bob, because I'm a big advocate for Bob Newby, like in terms of his role in Joyce's life. So I don't know that I'm super down if it's just gonna be like we're just gonna put Bob into this box of like he's Bob the Brain and no one likes him. Like I don't know that I would be super interested in that, because I liked that character a lot.
Yeah, I did too, and I think this is something that Ashley touched on, but one of my big issues is like, first of all, when you read that description for the play, it makes it sound like Henry Creel, Joyce, Hopper, Bill, and Lonnie were all in school at the same time, which is completely not true.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like he'd be in elementary school, they'd be in high school. Like if you knew nothing about the series, if you read that description, so I was like, what the heck? Second of all, they're changing people's last names around. They've given Bob a random sister we never see mentioned in the show. Like, so the backstories just don't line up, and that bugged me. And then I actually touched on this, but if they are going to go more into Hopper and Joyce's backstory, and obviously Lonnie and Barbara would be a part of that, I want to see it on screen. I don't want I gotta watch a recording of a play from the UK to get this backstory. That to me feels absolutely cheap. I want to see it on screen. I want those character moments on screen. I want flashbacks. And I was hoping we were going to get that in season 4. So if they are going that route and that's the only time we ever see it, that would really bother me, because I really love Joyce Hopper's characters, and I want to see that. I want to see them have those conversations, or us to see those flashbacks in season 5. Like the other thing feels like a cop out. And I agree. I don't think reducing Bob to that role is fair to him. I also really love Bob. I mean, I knew for the moment he appeared on screen he was going to die, but still, I love him as a character. And I also don't love the fact that, like, because of the time period they're setting it in, Lonnie is going to be a big part of that, because I feel like this gets skipped over. People like don't misremember this, but like Lonnie is an abusive psycho. Like he terrorized his poor family for like 10 years.
We on Coffee Contemplation, we definitely theorize that Lonnie is probably a narcissist, and I will admit that I find Lonnie interesting as a character. Like I think he adds an interesting dynamic to the character roster, but I certainly don't like him. I'm not rooting for him. But yeah, like I'd be interested in more knowing like how does Lonnie play into that, but I don't know that makes for a great story. I don't know. So it's really early. It's hard to say, but just as far as like I'm not that's why like I heard on another podcast ages ago, like, hey, if it's your jam, cool, I will sit back and let you have my extra viewings, whether it's streaming or in person, like. And as far like I mean I try to take the show based on like what what is there? I mean, I did really enjoy a couple of the standalone novels. I have not finished reading the one based on Hopper. I didn't like that one as much, but I did really like Rebel Robin and Runaway Max.
I love Rebel Robin. I love the podcast. I listened to the podcast and I read the whole book. I love Runaway Max.
I'm really hoping that we'll get one with Eddie, because there's one coming out. There's the next book in the line. I mean, I would love one on the, from Lucas on the line too, but with Caleb and Glocklin, but I'm hoping maybe they'll do, since Joseph Quinn has like taken over the entire internet, I'm hoping maybe they will pick up on that and they'll do one with him for
They are doing an Eddie book though.
Well, they are, yeah. I'm hoping that maybe they'll do a companion podcast like they did with Rebel Robin.
Oh yeah, no, that
would
would
be
be
cool.
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I really like Maxon and Robin's books.
They were great.
Yeah.
All right, so are you guys like surprised that we haven't gotten anything like related to season 5 yet at the time of this recording, like any, promo content or anything like that? I mean, obviously I don't know if they're still writing it, but I remember after season 3, they did like a little video graphic thing for what was to come. So, and they have yet to do that, and they did that like 2 or 3 months after season 3 came out. So, is anyone surprised that they have yet to do anything except for give us the episode title of the first episode from season 5? Robin, we'll start with you.
No, I'm not remotely surprised. I mean, I think that, and in a way, I kind of feel like they don't need to do as much promotion at this point, because there is so much attention on Stranger Things because of all of these I think the announcements of all of these other things that they're doing, I think that's their promotion that they're doing. They're generating interest through that. And I think what's important, I think the thing to keep in mind is that right now, the Stranger Things team is busy. Like all the entire art department, production design, like all of that stuff, they are doing all of their most intensive work right now because they haven't started filming yet. Like the costume design, like all of that stuff, they are in full swing. And so the fact that they're focusing on that, I actually think is a smarter move. I would rather, I mean, I don't know if it's because I'm a little bit older and maybe just I'm not as used to having as much content all the time, but I prefer the build up to be longer and be a little bit quieter, because to me, if they're focusing on what they're actually making rather than on the promotion side of it, I'm a little bit more encouraged by that. The fact that they haven't started filming yet, like I would love to see another one of those, like they're all meeting for the table read. Like that was a lot of fun. But in terms of like active promotion, like I feel like they've got the fandom pretty locked in. And the fact that we're going to get the next season a lot faster than we got season 4, for obvious reasons. We're not in lockdown. We don't have the pandemic to deal with in the same way. It makes sense to me that they haven't really released anything, and I'm not discouraged. I mean, I'm also the kind of person that like I tend to prefer delving into a lot of the making of stuff and the behind the scenes, all of that stuff after I've seen the thing. Like I like to come in fresh, enjoy the thing as it is experienced, and then look into how they did the thing because I'm already familiar with it. So I'm not really the best person to ask this question to, because that's one of the reasons why we haven't been doing as much of that over on Coffee and Contemplation, because I mean, that's most of the other Stranger Things content creators are doing that already. So I don't feel the need to throw my hat in that particular ring, because I'm not as good at it, but also I kind of prefer to wait. Like I like to watch the trailers and kind of look at like, cool, that's what's happening, but I don't mind waiting a little bit longer. I feel like a lot, the best things come to those who wait. I feel like that's kind of my approach to it all. So no, I'm not really surprised, but I'm also not that disappointed, because that's not really my thing. So like I said, I don't know if I'm the best person to ask.
Jasmin, what about you?
I get what you're saying, Robin. Like I'd like to have a little bit more content, but at the same time, I can also appreciate how much work goes into the show, and I would rather they focus on making it the best it can be rather than giving us random stuff. I would like to see a final table read. That would be really cool. And I think something that I really appreciate about this show that I didn't know until season 4, like I had gotten to the show during the pandemic. I'd never seen it before. And so my first season of really like looking at all the promo and watching things happen live was season 4. And something I really appreciate is, so I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole on Instagram where I like followed one person that's on the crew. And then you know how Instagram will like suggest things to you? So I now follow a bunch of people on the crew. And so getting to see part of that process is super fascinating to me. And something I really appreciate about the show is a lot of shows, you know, it becomes successful and they will replace all the original people with like people with a better track record, fancier, better, whatever. And something I really appreciate about this show is if you look at the crew, most of the people that were originally there in seasons 1 and 2 are still there. And I love that.
Yeah,
I think it's like if someone does a good job, you shouldn't replace them. You should keep them around. And so something that when people are complaining about how long season 4 was taking, if pandemic hadn't happened, we would have had it on time. Or like maybe it might have been a month later, but you know what I mean? Like we would have had it on relatively on time.
Well, and
It's not their
also,
fault. There was
I mean, the sheer amount of content, it was so much more, and there's so
Yeah.
much visual effects. Like, yeah, it definitely made sense to me that one took such a long time to get released.
Yeah, for me too. And something that I realized by kind of following a bunch of these people is, so for example, Carol Lambert, who does all the artwork, like all the posters and everything. So he was originally hired to do the original poster that was done. And so as they loved his work, so I kept him. And so as the show has progressed, he started off doing one like drawing of the original poster, and then he shows his work. So for season 3, he had to create like this digital file that he popped open, and it had to have multiple layers so they could take that one file and convert it from poster to 3D pop-up to billboard to digital ads. So a single product on that show now has to do 10 million things where it only had to do one before. And something I learned was that basically like when they talked to their crew, they're like, we can do this, but I've never done this before, so we need more time. And they were like, okay, we'll give you need a few more months, we'll give you the time you need. We'll take this time to edit, we'll take the time to make sure the art is done the way you think it should be, that the sets and the hair and the makeup, that it's all done to the best it can possibly be. And I have such respect for that. And I think I think it should be done that way. I would rather wait an extra 3 months for something and know that the crew that's been there since season 1 and 2 are still there and they worked their hardest on, they were given the time and space to do it properly, and that they were given that faith and compensated for their work fairly, than them have it come out earlier, but they got replaced by some guy that can do it faster. To me, you should respect that art, and if someone made something great, if they made season 1 what it was, they deserve to be there. So that's why I always, when people are like, oh my God, it took so long, and I'm like, I have no problem with that, because like I would rather them do it that way and do it right than do it another way and have it out faster. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it to you guys' point, like I tell you, and Robin can attest to this. I mean, excuse me, Jasmin can attest to this because we talked about it many times. But as a podcast host and as a content creator for Stranger Things, I, for one, am really grateful for this period of time where there's no new season 5 content, because we've got a lot of shows lined up that we want to record, and it's like if we're getting a bunch of content left and right, we'd have to stop what we're planning and then focus on that, and it just becomes such a hectic mess of what do we choose to record and what do we not choose to record so we can do this. So it's been really good to just sit back and just let things come as they may.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and don't get me wrong, like I understand that the reason that interest is there from the fandom is because it's like, just we want more, like there was so much and now there's nothing. So I totally respect that the itch being there. My approach to scratching that itch is to go back and just start rewatching the show again. But I don't want to have any, like, I don't want it to seem like I'm throwing shade at like the idea of like, but we want more stuff. It's kind of like it's still early days. Like it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's gonna be another minute or so before we
Yeah.
get stuff. But I do understand that impulse of wanting to know things. Like I get it. It's just not my experience with it.
Yeah, and it's been fun too. Like we're having time now to, plan of things ahead of what we want to do once season 5 comes out and all that. Like, we're planning to do, a live stream to talk about the new season or, the trailers, all that stuff. And also, as we continue to expand our brand and stuff, we actually have time to be able to devote to that. Whereas if we were getting like content left and right, we would not be able to do that or to stop and have guests such as yourself on to talk about the show. Like there would not be any time. And considering this is like just a hobby, I mean, there would be like very little time for us to do that.
I feel that on a deep spiritual level.
uh, I figured that you would probably agree to somewhere in that vein, because I know, like you mentioned earlier, that now you're just starting to do your season 4 recaps, which I think is great because I know there was a lot of Stranger Things podcasts who did their recaps on season 4 immediately after it came out, and now they're all done, and they're not producing new stuff because there's nothing really to talk about. So I think, definitely for you choosing to wait it out and do that, I think would be really awesome because people will get to hear your takes on season 4 and it'll be something new to listen to.
I mean, I know there are a couple of other podcasts that sprung up in the wake of season 4, so there are a couple of other podcasters that are like just now getting to it as well. So, so there's definitely but that does spring from that interest of like, we want to keep it going, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So shall we get into our favorite Stranger Things scenes?
Let's do it.
All right. So we're going to begin where it all began on November 6th, 1983, the night that Will Byers went missing. Of course, I'm talking about season 1. So, Robin, would you like to start us off?
Sure. So I will say that so on Coffee and Contemplation, we actually did a favorite scenes episode, but we approached it totally differently. We just did our favorite our top 5 scenes just of the whole thing. So I'm super excited about this because like this me the chance to like delve into more of the scenes that I like. Over there, I will say like my number 2 favorite scene in the whole show from season 1, and it's the Big Chick Van Flip junkyard apology that opens chapter 7, the bathtub. Chapter 7, the bathtub is probably, if pressed, I would say that's probably my favorite episode of the entire show thus far, because and that was something I discovered in the podcast of it. But that whole sequence, especially now, having since recording our favorite things episode, having now watched ET and being able to compare the bike chase in ET to Stranger Things, I'm just so impressed by how independent that sequence actually does work. I can see the influence, but it really holds up on its own. And I love that sequence, especially because the stakes are so high, but they're so personal. And it balances its tone and its pacing so effectively. The fact that it's this really high stakes, high energy octane chase. It's kids versus the lab. You get the stunt of the van flip, and then it concludes with that junkyard apology, which is really the true end of that sequence, which is why that whole thing is the cold open to the episode. But yeah, I mean it's iconic for a reason. I like that it continues to be something that we see referenced in a lot of the looking back over the whole series. I love that scene. And I mean I'm kind of cheating because it's really a whole sequence, but yeah, spectacular.
I also had that as my top favorite scene.
Oh, really?
I think Ashley, I think you had it too, didn't you?
Where the kids make up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't have that on my list, but I also like that scene. because it reminds me of, my own childhood when, you know, when you're a kid and tempers are flared, you say things that you don't always mean. And, you know, but at the end of the day, you're still friends and it's not really worth fighting over, and you just apologize and you move on. And it's definitely brings me back to my my childhood, certainly.
Yeah, I agree. I think they captured so well in season one that essence of being a child, and not like the sanitized, fictionalized version we sometimes get. You ever watch a show or a movie and you walk out of it and you're like, okay, I don't know who was behind that, but they've clearly never met a child or a teenager in their life.
Yeah.
Like the dialogue's unrealistic. They don't look, and it's something that got me right from the beginning with Stranger Things is that these are clearly, they're written like kids and they feel authentic. All the characters feel authentic, and the actors have talked about how collaborative a process that is, and that like they've always been trusted to play the scene the way they want to play it.
Mhm.
And I think that really comes through because they feel authentic.
Well,
And
there's
I just love that.
Yeah, and something so poetic about where that sequence falls in the season, as far as like this is Lucas has this is the makeup of Lucas saying, like, she's a traitor and all this. This is after they've Dustin tried to force the apology, the making up between Mike and Lucas earlier in this in the season, and it wasn't time for that yet. They hadn't actually resolved anything. And so by the time you get to here, through the whole bike chase up through the van flip, it's like Lucas is like, they're coming for her, she get out of there, like he's clearly convinced. And so then get to the actual apology. It not only does it take place in the same physical space where they had their fight in the to begin with, but it really feels earned. Like they have actually come to a new level of understanding for one another, and that's why it works, and that's why it's so beautiful. I just the performances, like you were saying, in addition to the way it's written and structured, it's so well done.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And kind of coming off of that, so my top one for season one is the van scene. Then second to that, I would say the two scenes we get at the beginning and the end of the season where the party is playing D&D.
10,000%.
Yeah, I love that.
mean,
I love the um I love the camaraderie that you see. I love that, like, I have a cousin who's a D&D fan, and that it accurately represents, it would have the way the game is played or the way it would have been played in the 80s. I've seen lots of people comment on the fact that, the way it was played in the 80s versus the way it's played now has morphed and evolved. I love that. It just like that whole like 10 more minutes, the whole thing with Mike's mom, and the fact that they come full circle back to that at the end. And because we know, like, even when we don't know what's happening, even when you're just watching the first episode and you know nothing, the part of the scene where, when the kids go to leave Mike's and Will's like, it was a 7. He goes, what? And it's like, it was a 7. The roll was a 7. The Demogorgon, it got me. And then he bikes off, and Mike's just staring after him, even though you don't know anything about what's going to happen. I mean, from the episode title, but I feel like it sucks you in so completely you totally forget about that as soon as you start watching.
Yeah.
It's just so haunting, and there's also something so earnest, I think, about the kids. And when you're at that age, everything is very earnest. And I just love that. And I always love the full circle moments on this show.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you gonna say?
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, go ahead.
I would also say that that's one of the best character introductions of any show that I've seen. It's so like, it's hard for me to believe that they filmed it so early, because it feels so organic and so natural, both in the way it's shot and the way it's performed, the way it's written. It's so effective in doing so much establishing of relationships and character dynamics so quickly. And something about it that I particularly appreciate as a D&D player is how much I across the board, like between at least in seasons 1, 2, and 4, the way that they approach the game, even if they're presenting it in a more modern fashion, I really like how much integrity and dignity they bring to D&D as a concept. I mean, and really to tabletop RPGs in general. Like they don't, again, with the exception of the third season because reasons, they really do. They bring a lot of, like I said, dignity and integrity to the game and to the kids who are playing it. They don't treat it like this is stupid, but we love them anyway. And that's something that I think is a really tired trope that Stranger Things just didn't even delve into that. And it's such an active part of their vernacular all through the season. So establish it at the front and then keep it relevant through the season and through their characterizations through the series has been, I think, really valuable. So it's not a throwaway thing in the beginning just to establish who they are as people. It's actually very, very, very critical to make a slight pun there to who they are and who we will see them continue to be. So yeah, very effective storytelling.
Yeah, I love that as well. And I think you see throughout the show, I've seen other people who are D&D players comment on this, that they use the vernacular of the game and the framing of it. And a lot of shows would have just dropped that after season one, but the fact that they continued that and they continue to use that framing all throughout the seasons. And I think we really see it becomes particularly important in season 4 when we're starting to delve into what is the upside down really and what really happened. And so that when they come back to those moments, rather than feeling like throwaway callbacks, it's like, no, this is the framing and the vernacular we set up in season 1. And it goes all the way through. And so you're right, it doesn't just set up character, it's really what's used to frame the show. And I love that it's done in a way like, you're right, they don't treat it like, oh, this is stupid. They take it seriously. And even if you're not a D&D player, it's accessible to you. And I really like that. And I like that we have the contrast with the older teens and the adults who have like no idea what they're talking about. And I love the evolution of it going from like, oh, it's a stupid kids game, like I don't know what you're talking about, to being like, all right, this is the only language we have to contextualize what we're dealing with. And that kind of respect that builds over the seasons where it's like they've created this framework to deal with it. And how that kind of weaves all the way through. So I really love that as well. And I don't know if you guys did this, but for each of the seasons, when we were thinking about our favorite scenes and moments, I put down my favorite scenes and moments when I was taking notes, but I also put down what my favorite plot was. So I don't know if either of you did this, but because when I think of the seasons, I have particular scenes, but I also have particular plots where I'm like, I really love that plot. I don't know if either of you did that, but I did that.
I like that as an idea, but I didn't do it.
I put down the scenes.
Yeah. Well, I guess since I knew I could go and do it anyway. Since I feel like we will probably, the reason I did that was I'm like, I feel like when I started taking notes that we were probably going to duplicate on a lot of the scenes. And so I'm like, if I put in my favorite plot, then I have something else to talk about.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So the one I have down for this for season 1 is Steve and Nancy's arc throughout the season, because it's not a specific scene that I'm a fan of. It's just that like out of the entire, if you subdivide all of the plots, that was the one that it was the first thing I went back and like rewatched those scenes when I was first rewatching the show. Like that was in between watching it with my friend. That was the first thing I rewatched. That was the first thing like I really connected with. So I also really love the way that, from Steve and Nancy's side and perspective, I really love the way that plot was done. And that was something I connected with really early on. And so I was like shocked and pleasantly surprised when they brought that back in season 4, because I love that in season 1 and 2. I missed it in season 3. So I was really happy when they came full circle back to that original dynamic that they had.
I will say that while I don't know that I would necessarily call that my favorite arc, I will say that like I don't know that I would go that far, but I remember in our wrap up of the first season when when I started Coffee Contemplation, I was surprised that was that group of characters, not just those two, but Nancy, Jonathan, Steve, and Barb, like the older teens, was the group that we ended up talking about and analyzing and like digging into the most. And that I didn't expect that. I didn't think there was going to be that was going to have like the most like fertile discussion stuff. I mean, it kind of weirdly makes sense to me now, but yeah. So in a way, kind of same, sort of similar.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that. It's one of the things that you don't think there's gonna be a lot there because it's so simple. but I think because it mirrors so closely, I think experiences a lot of us have had, minus the supernatural. Like I said, they really go the extra mile to make the teens and the kids feel real to an experience you would have. I think that when you go back and analyze or think about it, that comes through really strongly. So what about you, Ashley? We've talked a lot about our favorite things from this season. I know you had the van scene on your list. Was there anything else you had that you really loved from this season that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so really quick, I'm gonna go through my little list here from season 1, but there is one I do want to take a little bit of time on. Obviously, you mentioned the van flip scene, iconic. I really liked when Joyce is at the store, like for the second time buying a phone, and her boss is like, he made some comment about her being in there for like the second time that week to buy a phone, and she's like, "Just ring me up, Donald." It's just, I love Winona in that moment. It's so funny. At Mike when he jumps off the cliff and 11 comes in to save him. It's a little bit far fetched, but the fact that not only the writers on this show, but Mike himself had the cojones to actually do that, knowing he was going to die, was really cool. The first time I ever watched that scene, I couldn't believe that had just happened. So I really like that. Hopper, when he's in the morgue, determining if Will's body is fake or not. And I really like, how David Harbour plays that scene of like, I know in my gut that this is not Will's real body, but what if it is his real body and I'm just about to cut this kid open? And then obviously when he pulls out the stuffing and there's just the look on his face when he realizes that something is really going wrong there. I love the way Dave Harbour acts that scene out. And then I have another Joyce moment of her after she gets, her phone and the cord is not long enough to reach into the living room, and she just gets in her chair and she just scoots it across the floor up to the receiver on the wall. I just love it because she's like, I don't care. I'm gonna do whatever it takes. I'm gonna sit here by this phone and wait for Will to call. Love it. And then finally, I like the scenes of Nancy in the Upside Down. I put that there because after watching season 4, looking back on that, Upside Down looks completely different, in terms of the CGI and special effects. But I just love, how when she gets in there, just the look on her face of like, these it looks like the same woods, but there's all kinds of particles everywhere, and everything sounds kind of different here. And I just love the way that scene was shot and the cinematography there. So those are my favorite scenes from season 1. I mean, I have obviously more than that, but those are always the ones each time I rewatch season 1 that always stand out to me.
I have a handful of other ones too, but yeah, those are some great ones. So
I will say, I know actually you're a big Mike fan. I will say that Mike and then Joyce and Hopper both individually and together have some really fantastic and well acted season 1. I think that's why it is ultimately my favorite season. I know for a lot of people that's season 4, but for me, season 1 is ultimately my favorite season. So I do like a lot of your picks there, especially Joyce at the store. She's like, I work every day and Christmas. Ring me up, Donald. Like my
I never complain. I've gotten sick. It's just ring me up, Donald.
Like we have this. My friend and I have this ongoing thing that we say, which is that following Stranger Things, we started watching like we're on a real like 80s movie kick, and so we watched Beetlejuice for Halloween and that kind of thing. And our ongoing kind of joke is that like no one does crazy like Winona Ryder does crazy, and it's her absolute commitment to it that we absolutely love, and we mean that like the best way possible. Is that she's just fantastic, and I love that part of her arc in season 1 where she's like, I never complain. I do my, like, she's someone who does her thing, keeps her head down. But she's like, and now you're not going to back me up when my kid is missing? Like, I don't give an F Like, ring me up. Like, I don't care what I have to push. I don't care what I have to do. I'll look as crazy as I need to. Her whole speech to Lonnie. Like, I love that. Like, that just made me fall in love with her as a character. I love that. And yeah, and then Hopper, like the way all that stuff is played and the way he's there, his interactions with Jonathan and Joyce, the scene in the morgue, the whole thing. Yeah, it's just brilliant. It's so well acted, and like Robin, you were saying, season 1 does such a good job of establishing who these characters are, where they're at in life, just who they are. And I love that they continue that. It's not like a one shot, like this is who they are, and now we're dropping this. Those things continue to crop up and weave through the rest of the show. And I feel like we're really rewarded as fans for paying attention. And that's something I really truly love about season 1.
Yeah.
So efficiently. I'm always baffled. Every time I go back to season 1, I am so impressed with how tight and how quickly and yet like perfectly satisfactorily they like just how fast that season moves. And like, I mean, there is not a shred of fat on that season. Like, I think the seasons have gotten progressively more and more bloated, but that first season, I mean, it is lean and mean. It is, I mean, yeah, just so efficient. And that's something I'm hoping for in season 5 is that they bring back some of that like efficiency of their storytelling.
So do I. Like, just quick, straight to the point. It's kind of funny because when I rewatch, especially season 1 and even season 2, and how much smaller scale those seasons are comparatively, certainly to season 4, and I see, how Hopper conducts his investigations and all that, and I'm like, this is kind of the stuff that I miss from the show, like just the quote unquote intimate moments like that of just picking off random slime goo from trees, and investigating rotten pumpkins and stuff like that. Like, those are the aesthetics that I really miss about the show. I don't know if we'll get those back or not in season 5, but I'm definitely hoping that, season 5 will have that feel of season 1, of being compact, but quick and to the point. Here's our story. Here's how we're going to finish it. So I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the other scenes that I have, I mean, the other scenes that I had on my list, like honorable mentions, I guess, that I had were the heroes sequence, the end of chapter 3, Holly Jolly, the discovery of Will's quote unquote body. Like that's still probably neck and neck with the ending of Dear Billy in season 4 as my favorite conclusion to an episode. Like, I still think that is equally as powerful. It's so well done. And then I also, on a less serious note, I did have why are you keeping this curiosity door locked? The Dustin's phone call.
I love that one.
I adore
Mr.
that
Clark's
sequence.
trying to have a date night, and he's like, Jesus Christ, this kid.
We could talk about this on Monday.
Nope. I mean, I think and I said this on Coffee and Contemplation. I think that's one of the things that I like about that sequence is like how it's an early indication of like what a like dark horse Dustin and Gaten Matarazzo are in the series. Like, that's an early sign of like, oh, this character is gonna do more moving forward. And then my last choice of like a favorite moment was I think you'll notice a theme here for me is as we move forward, but the bat twirl, as I call it, when Steve returns in chapter 8, the episode.
Yes, oh my God,
Steve's
great,
return.
so hot,
Yeah.
like
Yep.
freaking fantastic. Just like, have you seen those gift sets about him twirling things?
Oh, of course.
He does it with the bat, and then the ice cream scoop, and then
yeah.
I can't remember what it is in season 4, but he does something, and it's like
the phone in season 3 too.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a twirl, but it's of the same spirit.
Yeah.
So, speaking of season 2, you want to get into our favorite scenes from the second season?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Robin, you're our guest. You can start.
I guess, like, off the record, do you want me to just go through them all, or do you want me to like do my first or whatever?
You can go through them all if you want to, or you can go individually. Whatever
Okay.
Up to
works
you.
best for you.
Up to you.
Yeah.
All right, I'll blitz through them here. So I will admit that season 2 is my personal favorite season. I think season 1 is the technical best season, but season 2 is the one that I come back to the most, which I know is a very unpopular opinion. But so this one was hardest for me to actually like just narrow it down because I love this one so much. But one of my favorite like scenes across the entire series again is Mike and Eleven's reunion at which is the end of chapter 8 and into the beginning of chapter 9 of season 2. I think there's so much powerful storytelling happening there. So that's really high on my just overall list. I again, this is super unpopular, but another one that I have on here is Elle's decision to leave Kali at the end of chapter 7, the I can save them. That moment really, really strikes a chord with me. It always has. So that's here. That's on my list. I love that. I love that sequence, and I think it's incredibly valuable. And I think that's it. You can't take that out of the series. Season 2's opening, the boom, the introduction of Kali, like that sequence is so powerful. I love it. And I also have on here what I feel is the very beginning of Lumax. Lumax is my personal favorite ship on this show. And so it's the scene, I like talking with you, Mad Max, right before the big showdown in the junkyard, Max and Lucas talking on the roof when they kind of have their heart to heart, as it were. I really, really like that sequence because it's romantic, yeah, but it's also like just them talking and being real with each other. So they're establishing a real just human to human connection, which does eventually lead to romance. But I just really appreciate that. And then Say You Understand when Max stands up to Billy at the end. I adore that sequence. I love it. I was listening to some other Stranger Things podcasts recently from back when season 2 first came out, and something we even discussed on Coffee and Contemplation was how would that actually hold up? And just because Billy is sedated, like will that actually have any lasting impact? And I've been thinking a lot about that because that was something I didn't think that it would at the time that we recorded our episode on season 2, but I think I might have changed my mind on that because I think it's Max is saying like I'm going to start standing up to you just in general. So I think that does actually hold some semblance of permanence, even if it's like we're gonna keep fighting. I think Max is ultimately just saying in that moment, I'm not gonna cower before you anymore. Like I will start standing up for myself moving forward. So, and then kind of just a blanket, all the Steve and Dustin stuff, all of it. That's I love it. I love every single moment they're on screen together. Steve and Dustin are my 2 favorite characters in the show. Like so, and all of that stuff, that them teaming up, the train track sequence, the bit with the cellar, like him dropping him off at the snowball. Like I adore it. It's all fantastic. So that's kind of a cheat, but there it is. That's my list. Those are my season 2 choices.
Right on. I think I had a bunch of those on my list as well. I think we think in similar ways. But yeah,
great minds, etc., etc.
Yeah, my favorite plot from that season is Dustin and Steve teaming up. Especially because the Duffer Brothers got right said that like that was something that didn't come around. It was not a planned thing, but they got to that point of the season, and then they were like, "Well, shoot, like who's available right now? Dustin's looking for people. Steve's available. All right, well, I guess we're pairing those 2 up because we wrote ourselves into a corner where these are the 2 characters available.
Right.
See how that goes. Whoopsie." And then it turned out to be absolutely fantastic. And so, something I love about the show is their ability to pivot and be like, okay, we accidentally wrote ourselves into a corner here, or like, this is where we were intending to go, but the actors played it this way, or this is the only character available, and that creates some new dynamics. And I love that when they do something like that, whether it was intended or not, if it's successful, they continue that, and they roll with it, which I really think has served them well. Because I've talked about this in the show before, but there's a lot of shows I'm a huge fan of that got to be not as good in their final seasons, or I stopped watching because they very obviously went in the opposite direction, where like clearly actors had chemistry or something was grooving, and they went in another direction. And you would read articles and they'd be like, oh, they decided this last summer, so therefore. And it's like, it's so forced, it's so obvious. So I love when you see something, it's like that was unexpected but wonderful. and they dive right into it. And Steve and Dustin are that 100%. The train track scene, but also when they're in the car and he's like, "How do you know it's not a lizard?"
Right.
He's like, "Because his face opened and he ate my cat." And then look at Steve, he's like, "All right." Or
Okay.
later it's like, yeah, or like later when Dustin's not being honest and he's like, "Are you kidding me? He ate Muse."
Right.
Like there. And then when he drops him off with the snowball, and people have commented on how, like, Steve and Nancy wind up teaming up even when they don't realize it. Like, Steve gives him the pep talk, drops him off. And then when all the other girls are jerks to him, Nancy comes in and is like, "I'm going to show them," and makes him feel better. And you see very clearly that she has always known that Dustin's had a crush on her. And, and I think in terms of growth, you see from season one, Nancy, who she is at the beginning of that season, where he offers her the last slice of pizza and she slams the door in his face, to who kind of, and Mike even comments on that, that she, everyone's like, "Well, she used to be cool." And it's like her coming back to what's important. And I was a bit sad that we didn't get to see, like, the fact that because Mike was in California, we didn't get to see Mike and Nancy's dynamic very much in season 4. I like that we did get to see her dynamic with Max and Dustin and Lucas and Steve and Robin. Like, I love that we got to come back to some of that. But yeah, there's so many great moments. And like I said, I think season 2 is my second favorite season. In terms of my favorite scenes, I have the one where Will and Mike are sitting together, and it's the crazy together scene where they're talking about what's going on in his basement. And then the precursor to that, which is when they're out for Halloween, and he has like a flashback. Well, we think it's a flashback, but that moment with the mind flayer. And Will is there for him, and Max is confused as to what's going on, and the others are trying to help, and Mike kind of just steps up in that situation. Love that whole sequence. And another favorite one I had was the table scene in Joyce's kitchen between Joyce and Hopper.
Yeah, I had that on my list and then cut it because I had so many. But yeah, that's my favorite Chopper moment, to be honest.
Love Chopper. Just when she's like, "I just want this to go back to normal," and he's like, "It's not going to go back to normal. It's going to get worse before it gets better. It's not." And I love that they still have that support and love for each other, even though she's with Bob by this point and he's hiding Elle and he can't tell her. Like, they obviously know even when they know they're keeping secrets, they're still there for each other. And I love that Hopper's able to support Joyce and her family in that way, because what they're dealing with is something more akin to, what his experience has been as a soldier and as a police officer. And I love that he's able to kind of support them and be that voice of reason and be like, everyone's going to tell you this or that, or the lab is telling them this and that. And he's like, you know what I mean? Like, this is not going to just magically go back to normal. This will be a part of your lives. These anniversary stuff is real. And we find out the now members are real. What I love too is they treat that stuff with respect, and what Hopper is saying and what Will's experiencing, I think it's all part of it. It's not just that the now members are real, but what Will is experiencing and what everyone is experiencing, Nancy as well, with the anniversary of Barb's death and disappearance, like that kind of thing where it comes back on the anniversary is 100% real. And I love that they explored that and they treated it with the respect I think it deserves. So I really love that. In that season, this season has a lot of really great Chopper moments, which is interesting considering that she's dating Bob at this time. No shade to Bob, love Bob. But again, like, I knew from the minute, like, Bob was too good for this one. He's just a loving, kind, nice person. And the minute he appeared on screen, I'm like, oh, something's happened to that guy, because there's no way he survives this world with what they've set up. And Joyce and Hopper were obviously meant to be. So the minute I'm like, well, I love you, Bob, but there's obviously something happening to you. Like,
I mean, I think also what ends up happening because Bob is there, what it ends up doing is it ends up kind of forcing Hopper and Joyce to actually interact as friends and as teammates in a way that can't fully be explored past that. I mean, they push the boundaries of that a couple times, but I think that's what I appreciate about it, is the fact that they can't fall back on them like having romantic banter. They can't have them fall back on making out, because that's not really what the circumstance is. So it kind of naturally forces their friendship to grow. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I do too. And I love that they're able to be there for each other in that way. And I love that it kind of deepens. And David Harbour has some really beautiful quotes about this in interviews, but I loved his quote. I'm paraphrasing this, but basically about how like they are each other's family and that they're the only family they could ever have, and that there's these two broken people, but they're broken in two completely different ways, but they're able to kind of heal themselves through that connection that they have. And I love their dynamic. And we don't often see, I think, characters. I feel like in a lot of media, characters are either like broken and that's kind of it, or they're like put on this pedestal. And I love that you have that kind of middle ground where like these are good people who are deeply flawed and are dealing with some very real stuff. And I love that they're allowed to be messy, but they're still people you root for. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Love that about season 2. And that's our show. If you like what you heard today, be sure to subscribe and tell your friends. Our theme music is provided by Neon Nights, and our sound editing is provided by Ashton Cooper. Thank you for listening to this episode of Ham Radio, a Stranger Things podcast. Please join us next time, same dial, same time.
Over and out.